Bohemian Grove.
Oh my gosh, I know what you're talking about, bro.
For people who aren't familiar with Bohemian Grove, it was a conspiracy before, but it was proven to be true by Alex Jones. It's out in the public. It was a place in California where all of these elites or celebrities, whatever, people with a lot of money, specifically men, they would go to the woods and worship this owl god. They would be dressed in like wizard costumes, whatever, and then they would burn these stick-like figures and they would do these fake sacrifices. And recently there was a guy who snuck into the old hideout. His name was Dancer1 on YouTube. That's supposed to be the owl. You see the wings?
It's the owl statue. What the fuck? No way. Oh, that's hollow. Yeah.
That's so creepy, bro.
I've seen images, bro, and that's literally like, it's just fucked up because of the
covered in vegetation and stuff like that. These are videos that Alex Jones took. Bro, that's a lot of heads.
Before the cremation of care, all the Bohemian Club members begin a massive feast of revelry.
Hail Fellowship's eternal flame. Once again, midsummer sets us free.
Shh. This is my secret account. I don't know what I'm going to be posting on here, but if you start telling everybody, it'll ruin all the fun.
The guy in that video is named John Robert Bell, otherwise known as Joe Robe here on TikTok. Before John deleted his account, he had millions of followers and over 100 million likes, meaning that he was very popular here on TikTok. However, the world would soon turn against John when they found out that he was a pedophile. You see, on July 21st, 2021, a TikTok user named Dylan uploaded a disturbing video. Dylan stated that John, in the photo here, had tried to groom him. According to Dylan, John actually offered to rent a one-bedroom Airbnb to celebrate his 18th birthday, and he stated that he wanted to purchase alcohol for the minor. When Dylan asked John if there would be other people in this Airbnb or if it would just be those two drinking, John allegedly kept dodging the question. In addition, Dylan stated that John had joined him and his friends on a Zoom call, with their ages ranging from 15 to 19. And Dylan stated that John encouraged the group, including the minors, to take a BDSM test and send him their scores. Now, these are some pretty serious grooming allegations against John, and even though he decided to try fight them for a moment, he just deleted everything. That's why you never hear from Joe Robe anymore, because he deleted his account after being exposed as the creep that he is. If you want to join me on my journey to expose pedophiles and corruption, go listen to my new podcast, The Conspiracy Files, available on all streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
This teacher, nicknamed Bunda Becky by students, has been put in prison for doing this with teenage boys. Rebecca Joins was a 30-year-old teacher at a school in Manchester. She was nicknamed Bunda Becky by her students. It's reported that she always laughed off the inappropriate comments and was quite flattered by the attention. She would later claim that loneliness made her do the terrible things that she did. She initially connected with some of the teenagers at school over Snapchat. She then lured one boy to meet her in secret. She took him on a shopping spree as seen on CCTV here and bought him a £350 Gucci belt. Now, after going round the shops at the Trafford Centre with him, she took him back to her flat in Salford Quays. Warning the student that no one had better find out, she engaged in an S relationship with the boy. Now, the boy's mum actually got suspicious when he returned home with a love bite on his neck. The boy's mum went to the school and reported her suspicions. Police actually got involved at this point, but meanwhile, Becky started meeting up with another student. Known simply as Boy B, the teenager began an S relationship with Becky, and what happened next would shock everyone. She made him a treasure hunt at her flat. She arranged rose petals and hid little notes around her flat for him to find. The treasure hunt ended in a final present, a baby grow stating best dad. She was pregnant with the teenager's baby. By now, police were involved, as I mentioned, and when she gave birth to the child, it was immediately taken off her. She was arrested for S activity with 2 children and was found guilty. She will spend 6.5 years in prison.
This little boy went missing 6 years ago, but he was just found alive walking down a dark road in France. This story is actually insane. This is Alex Batty. He was 11 years old when he went missing during what was supposed to be a 2-week family vacation to Spain, but the details surrounding his disappearance are odd. In 2017, Alex was living with his grandma, who was his legal guardian in Oldham, England. His dad left when he was 2 years old, and ever since he was raised by his mom Melanie and his grandma, who eventually took over guardianship. Alex's grandma agreed to let him go on a vacation with his mom and grandpa to Spain, but that was 6 years ago, and that was the last time that she ever saw him. His disappearance became widely known, but there was literally no trace of him. But just last week, Alex, who is now 17, was found walking down the road in the middle of the night near the city of Toulouse in France. A delivery driver spotted him walking alone in the rain with a flashlight, backpack, and skateboard, and he offered him a ride. Alex agreed, and once he got in the car, he initially gave the driver a fake name, but ultimately he told him that his real name was Alex Batty and that he was kidnapped by his mom 5 years ago in Morocco. Alex told him that he had walked for 4 days and 4 nights through the rugged Pyrenees, sleeping in the light and hiking in the dark, trying to get to a big city to seek out authorities. He said that to survive, he ate what he could find in fields and gardens. He then stated that he'd been living a nomadic lifestyle in Spain, Morocco, and most recently France with his mom and grandpa as part of a spiritual community. He said that they would never stay in one place for too long, would grow their own food, they meditated, and contemplated reincarnation. According to Alex, he carpooled with a community of about 10 people doing odd jobs to get by, and they would carry solar panels with them for energy. It was only after his mom said that she wanted everyone to move to Finland that Alex decided he wanted to leave the group. He told the driver that picked him up that he had had enough and that he was 17 and needed a future, but that he couldn't see a future there. The driver took him to the police after looking him up online and finding out that he was indeed a missing child. Authorities then notified Alex's grandma that he was found, which she's obviously very excited about. According to her, Alex disappeared in 2017 because of disagreements over his care, and the fact that his mom and grandpa were interested in pursuing an alternative lifestyle with him. Alex told authorities that he was never physically abused, but that he had not attended school in the past 6 years, and he was reportedly in good health when he was found. Alex has since been reunited with his grandma. As for his mom Melanie, she is currently wanted by British police in connection to his disappearance, and she may be in Finland. His grandpa David is believed to have died about 6 months ago. Manchester police are still investigating the circumstances around Alex's disappearance and whether or not there should be a criminal investigation. What do you guys think about this case?
Kind of creepy in itself because it's about AI, a specific AI tool that was created by OpenAI. And OpenAI is the same company that made ChatGPT. And they also made DALL-E 3. DALL-E 3 is that program where you type in something and like it makes a picture.
I know what you're talking about.
And now they made an AI video tool called Sora. And this shit is fucking crazy, bro. Just the amount of progression that we've had within a year, bro. This AI video was of Will Smith eating spaghetti a year ago.
I remember that. Yeah, that's The Rock eating rocks. I saw that shit too.
But you see how like weird and like
distorted and shit.
Yeah, bruh. If you wasn't looking for imperfection to see if it was an AI video, you wouldn't be able to tell.
It looks like a movie.
All this shit is AI.
That's AI right there.
It's AI, bruh.
If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have been like, oh, that's AI, the fuck?
We thought robots and AI was going to take the boring jobs, the jobs that we don't want to do. But it's scary to think about AI is taking videographer jobs, photography and shit, and basically taking all the fun out of creative jobs. So everything looks lifeless and soulless.
We're going into the future, and it's scary as fuck, because, I mean, we're, like, in the middle of it, bro, in, like, maybe, like, 10, 20 years.
I say 10 years, bro.
We're going to see a big-ass difference, bro.
Magician David Copperfield is one of the biggest creeps on Earth. And trust me, you're going to see why in this TikTok. So if you don't know David Copperfield, he's a world-famous magician that really got famous in Vegas. And for years, his magic tricks have entertained people from across the world. But in May of this year, he was accused by 16 different women of schmexual misconduct. So these claims stretch from the 1980s all the way up to 2014. And some of the women who brought these allegations against David claimed that they were under the age of 18 when he assaulted them. At least 3 of these women claimed that David drugged them before having relations with them, which obviously were not consensual. He's also been accused of 4 instances of either groping women or making them grope him on stage during performances. One of these accusers claims that she was 15 years old when she met David, and that they stayed in touch over the phone. Yes, that means David essentially groomed her, and when she turned 18, When she turned 18, they had a consensual encounter, but now years later, the woman has realized that David groomed her from the age of 15. Now, David Copperfield and Jeffrey Epstein were very close friends. And in my next TikTok, I'm going to explore their relationship and some of the disturbing notes found at Epstein's house about David. But with all of these women coming forward against David, 16 different women, and also some of them claiming that they were minors when they were either assaulted or groomed, it seems that it's more than likely that David was participating in Jeffrey Epstein's human trafficking ring when it was in operation. So why hasn't he been prosecuted on any of these charges? 16 women making claims against him, pedophile claims, and he's been linked with one of the world's most infamous human traffickers, and yet no investigation. That's how this whole thing seems to go. If you want to hear my expose on Jeffrey Epstein, it's over an hour long. Go listen to the first episode of my new podcast, The Conspiracy Files. It's available now on all streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
These are the UK's youngest killers since James Bulger was murdered. Unless you've lived under a rock, you probably know about the harrowing case of James Bulger. He is a little boy who was murdered in 1993 by two 11-year-old boys. Did you know, though, recently in Wolverhampton there was another shocking murder by two children. On the 13th of November 2023, 19-year-old Sean Seaside was at Stowlawn playing fields in Wolverhampton with a friend. Now, Sean had dreams of becoming an engineer, and he was really well liked by his friends and peers. Him and his friend had been chatting on a park bench at around 8 p.m. that evening, talking about their plans for Christmas. Then he caught the eye of two 12-year-olds. Suddenly, in an unprovoked attack, the two children lunged at Sean. They pulled out a machete and said, "Run, bro." Now, Sean and his friend obviously started running for their lives, but unfortunately, Sean tripped up and was on the floor. The boys then hacked at him as he lay helplessly on the ground. The one boy punched him and stamped on him. Unfortunately, Sean stood no chance. After the murder, police searched the boys' homes and found an arsenal of weapons. Chillingly, one of the boys had actually posed on social media with a machete just hours before the murder. They also had disturbing photos and Google searches on their devices. Now, currently the 12-year-olds are having their identities withheld from the public, but the judge is considering revoking this. They have both been found guilty of murder. The boys' disturbing Snapchat conversation has been made public recently, in which they discuss the killing. One stated, "It is what it is." The other replied, "I'm scared, man." The other said back, "I'm not, I don't really care."
The most disturbing movies. It was also low-key banned, and it took a long time for it to fully release because of how controversial and disturbing the movie was.
Okay.
The Poughkeepsie tapes. It's a mockumentary of a serial killer, and it's just a bunch of found footage, specifically with all of his victims.
No, pop it.
What?
Pop it! What is your name? My name is Dave. What is your name?
And throughout the whole movie, it goes back from an interview to the detectives, sheriffs, and also the actual Poughkeepsie tapes revolving how he killed, tortured, and mentally abused his victims and shit. The very first tape that it shows is one of the very first victims in the movie, which was a 8-year-old little girl.
I don't remember that at all, bro. What?
You see the serial killer starts talking to the little girl, kind of knocks her out, and then he starts dragging her into the car, and obviously
takes her. Yeah.
One of the most disturbing parts, the serial killer kills a couple, and at the end of the clip you see how he had decapitated the boyfriend and sewed the head onto the stomach of the girlfriend. The other one was obviously Cheryl Dempsey, kept in there for mad long. At the end of the movie was mentally damaged and shit. She had Stockholm syndrome, basically trying to say that this whole time her abuser loved her and stuff.
He loved me. Nobody ever lets me say it, but it's true. He didn't mean to leave me, and someday he's gonna come back to me.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is one of the most disturbing images that you will ever see for multiple reasons. Let's talk about it. This is an x-ray of the pelvis of serial killer and cannibal Albert Fish. Albert had a serious self-harm and sexual mutilation kink, and in this x-ray, 29 self-embedded needles were lodged into his pelvic region. This in itself is incredibly disturbing, but who Albert Fish was and what he did is horrifying. Albert Fish, also known as the boogeyman in the Brooklyn Vampire, S.A.'d, killed and cannibalized at least 3 3 children between 1924 and 1928, but he was a suspect in at least 10 other murders and bragged about possibly having 100 victims. After Albert's dad died when he was really young, his mom placed him into an orphanage where he was often physically abused. But after a while, he began to enjoy the physical pain from the beatings. By the age of 12, he began drinking urine and eating feces, and would often spy on other young boys and watch them undress. By 20, he began SAing little boys, mostly under the age of 6, and it was around this time that he married a woman named Anna. They went on to have 6 kids together. Although his life seemed normal on the outside, his secret disturbing behavior would begin to escalate when in 1910 he met a teenager named Thomas. The two began a sadomasochistic relationship. And just 10 days into the relationship, Albert took him to an old farmhouse where he tortured him over a period of 2 weeks. He originally wanted to kill Thomas and dismember his body to take home, but it was really hot out at the time, and he said he feared someone would notice. So instead, he cut off half of Thomas's penis, poured peroxide over the wound, wrapped it in a towel covered in Vaseline, and then gave him $10. Albert then left him there and never looked back. A few years later, his wife would leave him, and it was at this point that Albert began having hallucinations and began to self-harm. This is where he picked up the habit of self-embedding the needles into his pelvic region. He would also repeatedly hit himself with a nail-studded paddle, amongst other really disturbing things that I cannot say on here. At this point, Albert would escalate to torturing, mutilating, and murdering young children because he said that God was commanding him to do so. He would use tools that he called his implements of hell, which included a meat cleaver, a butcher knife, and a handsaw. He went on to murder 10-year-old Grace Budd in the summer of 1928 after the Budd family put out an ad in the newspaper. Grace's brother Edward was looking for work, and Albert responded to the ad under the pretense of wanting to hire Edward. But instead he saw Grace, and he convinced her parents to let him take her to his niece's birthday party, which unfortunately was a complete lie. Instead, Albert took Grace to an abandoned house in Irvington, New York, where he strangled her to death. He then decapitated her and dismembered her body and ate most of her remains over the next few days. One of the most disturbing things about Albert was that he was known to write disturbing letters to the victims' families, and that's exactly what he did to the Budd family. Albert sent them an extremely gruesome and disturbing letter detailing what he did to Grace, how it took 9 days to eat her entire body. And in this letter, he also detailed other horrific child murders. One was the murder of 9-year-old Francis McDonnell, who disappeared after playing catch with some friends. He was later found hanging from a tree in a wooded area near his home. He had been SA'd and strangled with his suspenders. He also had extreme lacerations to his legs and stomach, and his left hamstring had almost entirely been stripped of its flesh. The next confession was the murder of 4-year-old William Gaffney. On February 11th, 1927, William was playing in his apartment hallway with a 3-year-old named Billy and Billy's 12-year-old brother. After a while, the 12-year-old stepped away, and it was at that moment that both the little boys disappeared. Billy was later found on the apartment roof, and when police asked him what happened to William, Billy said that the boogeyman took him. A witness later identified Albert as the person who kidnapped William that day, and although William's body was never found, Albert explained in great detail what he did to him in a letter that he wrote. Albert wrote how he cooked and ate his body parts in a stew. Albert was arrested for the kidnapping and murder of Grace Budd, in which he was convicted. He was executed by electric chair on January 16, 1936, at the age of 65 years old. Right before his execution, Albert wrote down his final confessions and gave them to his lawyer, but his lawyer said that he would never show them to anyone because of how disturbing they were. Albert Fish is one of the scariest men to ever exist.
I don't know if you ever heard about the Island of the Dolls.
All I've heard about is that it's literally just an island by itself with a bunch of dolls.
But have you heard about the legend behind it?
I've never heard about that.
In the 1950s, there was a man. His name was Julian Santana Barrera. He was a guy who loved peace and quiet. He didn't like being around people like that, so that's why he decided to live there. And then one day, his peace was interrupted by a girl that he heard in the canal drowning. In a panic, he tries to save the girl, but then when he tries to save the girl, he realizes that it's already too late. The girl is already dead. A little bit after, a doll appears in the same exact spot that the girl had drowned in. As respect, he ends up hanging up the doll on a tree. But after that whole thing, that same night, he started hearing voices and screams of a little girl basically being tormented by these evil spirits that he said. So what he decided to do was collect dolls no matter where he got them from, if it was a garbage, no matter how they looked, and he would hang them on trees. He put them around his little hut. He believed that by doing this, it would please the girl's spirit and also keep away evil spirits, and every single doll represents an evil spirit. For the next 50 years, he collected dolls, and I'm not talking about a couple hundred dolls, bro. I'm talking about thousands of dolls. But around, I would say 2001, he ends up getting a heart attack. But where his body was found was the exact same spot that the girl died in.
Have people seen shit?
I'm gonna show you a clip because Ghost Adventures actually visited the island, and
These angels were allegedly killed by the last person you would ever expect. Scarlett and Isaac Palmley lived in Jefferson County, Missouri with their mum Ashley. Scarlett was 9 and Isaac was 2. They were described by loved ones as 2 sweet children who had nothing but love in their hearts. Isaac loved running around, being carefree, and playing with his toy cars. Scarlett loved softball and also telling anyone who would listen about her cute little brother. She was looking forward to starting 4th grade at her school, but tragically wouldn't survive long enough to make it. In 2020, their mum Ashley posted on Facebook that she was struggling with depression. She expressed isolating herself as a way to cope with her poor mental health. In one post, she stated that she was, quote, always questioning if the kids would be happier or better off without me being their primary caregiver, because I knew that they deserved a much better role model. Back in 1999, Ashley's uncle had actually killed both of her grandparents. Then, in more recent times, Ashley changed her profile picture to a black screen. People were a bit concerned about this. What did it mean and what was going on? On the 24th of May 2024, things would come to a horrific end. At 10:30 a.m, Ashley walked into a police station absolutely soaking wet. She told them that she had killed her children. She allegedly claimed that she got up that morning and placed her children into a car with her and took a gun. She was captured on CCTV driving around for a while until she became stationary. She then allegedly stopped the car and fired a weapon. Now, gunfire could apparently be heard on the recording. She allegedly shot both children and hadn't realised that her son wasn't dead until she heard him cry. It's reported that she then took him to Timber Creek Resort and drowned him. When she got to the police station, she made the staggering confession. In the boot of her car, she had her daughter's lifeless body. Her son's tiny body was found where he had been drowned. It's believed that Ashley could now be facing the rest of her life in prison.
I see a lot of interracial couples, and when I see an interracial couple, I think one of two things, and I don't believe I can't imagine that I'm unique in this. I think one of two things: either the guy couldn't do any better, or the girl's a whore.
The man you just saw in that despicable video was Scott Paul Beerley, and in 2018 he walked into a yoga studio and shot 6 women before taking his own life. Scott was a military veteran and was extremely conservative. And before his death, he was a member on a number of conservative websites. In the past, Scott had worked as a substitute teacher, but he was fired from these places of employment because he was acting inappropriately with the students. In one instance, asking a minor if they were ticklish while touching them below the bra line. As it was later found out, Scott was a member of the incel community, meaning involuntarily celibate. This community is a group of pissed off dudes who think that the reason why they can't ever find women and never get laid is because women just suck. Scott was one of those guys. And he posted frequent vlogs talking about his open misogyny, his hatred towards women, and yes, as you saw in that video clip, he was also against interracial marriage and was very racist. So on November 2nd, 2018, Scott had had enough. And he went out to go attack a predominantly female space, a local yoga studio in Tallahassee, Florida. And so he walked into a yoga studio full of people doing some workouts and opened fire on the women. Unfortunately, 2 women lost their lives in this attack. Their names were Nancy Van Vessem and Maura Binkley. And just 3.5 minutes into the attack, the police arrived and they found Scott dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. This was a big shock to the Tallahassee community, and there were a lot of events held to remember the victims' memories. But this is a story that shows we really need to watch people's online presence and the things that they post, that they talk about, because they oftentimes can be warning signs that are ignored. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available now on all streaming platforms.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminated in acts of cannibalism.
Murder case inspired by the movie Scream. These 2 guys named Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk. They were 16 years old. Them wanted to be these amateur filmmakers led them to the idea of documenting everything, to the murder of Cassie Jo Stoddard, and mocked other serial killers, saying how like we're gonna be more famous than them, we're gonna be better than them.
We're gonna be murderers, baby. Like Ted Bundy. Like the Hillside Strangler, the
No.
Zodiac Killer.
Those people are more amateurs compared to what we're gonna be.
On September 22nd, 2006, she was gonna house at her aunt and uncle's house. And that Friday, Cassie's boyfriend pulled up to the house to watch a movie. Also brought their classmate, Brian and Tori. At some point during the night, Brian and Tori, quote unquote, left the house. Not knowing that before they left, Brian ended up going to the basement, unlocking the door, so then whenever they came back, it'll be easier for them to go inside. They go back inside, cut the power out from an electrical panel from the basement. They make some noise trying to lure Cassie down, but it doesn't work. Eventually, the boyfriend, he ends up calling his mom, saying, can you pick me up or can I stay the night? Because he doesn't want to leave Cassie alone. The mom refuses, but says Cassie's welcome to come to our house. Cassie just says no because she took the responsibility of house setting. He leaves, and that's when Brian and Tori try to lure her with more noise, but it doesn't work. They get frustrated. They go to the living room where she's sleeping, and that's when they stab her 30 times. And then, since they were recording this whole they recorded the aftermath of them killing her.
This is not a fucking joke.
I'm sick.
I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed
And also,
this huge pedophile operation on North Fox Island, and around the exact same time, 4 kids are abducted, held captive for days, sometimes up to 18, 19 days, and then found murdered in Detroit. So people are searching for any sort of connection there. And the North Fox connection doesn't really happen until like a decade or two ago. And this all happened in the 70s, so this is like 40 years on. And basically, the Cass Corridor in Detroit back then was a very rough neighborhood where people would go to buy drugs. There was prostitution everywhere. It was a very, very rough part of town. And the pedophilia there was open. You had child prostitutes walking the streets, people selling child porn at the porno shops, literally over the counter, in this part of Detroit. And a bunch of the suspects in the Oakland County child killing case were operating as pedophiles in the Cass Corridor at the time. Now,
let me set this up. Over a 13-month period in 1976 and 1977, there were 4 children that were found dead that had been abducted and they were murdered.
Yeah, and initially also authorities tried to say that the kids were not sexually assaulted, but it later came out that they were when police reports and the autopsy reports were actually examined decades later. But so the Cass Corridor is this like haven for pedophiles back then, and
that's just north of Detroit.
Yeah, it's just right in kind of Detroit proper area. And these people are receiving child pornography from somewhere. And that's where Francis Sheldon comes in. He's connected through these operators that are moving this child porn and, sexually assaulting children in the Cass Corridor. He's been linked to a couple of these suspects that are known through documents and police reports.
Imagine waking up in a prison cell to be told that you killed and ate your friend. Antron Singleton, also known as his rapper name Big Lurch, grew up in Dallas. He was rapping professionally from the age of just 15. Now, his lyrics were very disturbing, often referencing serial killers and cannibals. He ended up collaborating with fellow artists such as Mac Dre and E40. His future was looking bright until a tragic incident set in motion a series of horrific events. In 2000, he was turning 24. He was on his way back from his birthday party when a drunk driver collided with his car. Now, he was in agony, and it was actually a miracle that he survived. He suffered a broken neck in the horror crash. He began to self-medicate, as a lot of people do when they're in severe pain. He started taking a substance that starts with P, and I'm not sure I can say it on this app. Now, unfortunately, the side effects were awful. He experienced wild hallucinations, and one of his friends stated, he stayed high for weeks, not eating, getting more and more delusional, until the fateful day he thought the devil was inside his roommate's stomach. It was the 19th of April 2002. Big Lurch went to meet some of his roommates and friends to smoke the substance. After that, he said he has no memory of what went on. He would wake up in jail the next day to be told of the horrific situation that had occurred. Eyewitnesses from the scene said that the rapper told everyone who was in attendance to leave the house. That was except for one person. 21-year-old Tanisha Yasay. She was his roommate's girlfriend. What happened next is like something out of a horror film. The rapper lunged at her in a frenzied attack. He then beat her and stabbed her in the heart. He then sickeningly ripped her open and started to eat one of her lungs. Police were alerted and he was found running down the road without any clothes on, covered in blood. Horrifyingly, Tanisha's autopsy showed that she had bite marks on her face. Big Lurch would end up trying to blame the teeth marks on a hungry pit bull that had apparently just so happened to be in the area. However, this was proved to be false. He also tried to claim he was not guilty by reason of insanity. He was, though, found guilty of murder, torture, and aggravated mayhem. He was given 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole.
We're asleep, and she gets up to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, oh man, I have to go to the bathroom too. So I'm going to go to the bathroom in the main bathroom outside the room. I go out, I come back in, and I'm like, why'd you turn my light on my side of the bed? Like, it's 12, we're going to bed. Like, we're in bed. She's like, I didn't do it. I thought you did. I'm like, okay, well, somebody's trying to get our attention. My phone rings. It's my little sister. She says, hey, Bob, sorry, you awake? And I'm like, I am now. And I go, my light just came on. She goes, that's why I was calling you. She said, is Nicole there? I'm like, yeah. She put her on speaker. She said, Nicole, I don't want to get personal, but did your mom have miscarriages before you? And she's like, yeah. She goes, I'm seeing 3 people in the room right now trying to get your attention. And they're your 2 brothers and your sister that weren't born.
There's actually a dark, terrifying origins to the Amber Alert. This happened in 1996 in Arlington, Texas. And it was a little girl called Amber Hagerman, who was 9 years old. And she was riding her bike at her grandparents' house along with her brother Ricky. Next to the grandparents' house was a supermarket, which was abandoned. Basically, they were riding their bike there, you know, having fun and all. The little brother decided to go back to the house. So she stayed at the parking lot. That's when a black pull-up truck pulled up to her. A man got out of the truck, grabbed Amber, threw her inside the truck, and he dipped immediately. Now, luckily, a witness was able to, see it happen from his backyard. So he called the cops immediately. The cops showed up pretty fast, bro. Like, within minutes. It was pretty fast. So there was a huge search for Amber all over Texas, basically, hoping that they could find her and see who abducted her. Even with all that happening, bro, like, they still couldn't find her. About 4 days later, there was a man who was walking his dog at midnight.
Haven't seen this photo on the internet as of late. This is just moments before 12-year-old Emma Brown took her gun and used it on her father and then herself. Last September, Emma and another 12-year-old friend devised a plan to murder Emma's family and her pets and then run away to Georgia together. Shortly after this photo, she then proceeds to shoot her father in the stomach and then run toward her driveway to take her family car to meet with her friend about 230 miles away. It's believed in this moment that Emma might have panicked and then shot herself in the process. The thing that's raised a concern is, as of right now, Emma's friend, who hasn't been publicly identified, is believed to have planned the entire ordeal. One of the biggest discussions as of late is that Emma's family had no idea how her and her friend had actually met, but she has been arrested and charged with a conspiracy to commit murder. The father did end up surviving the incident, but now conversations are being struck throughout the entire internet about whether or not parents know who their children's friends are. The police have also raised concerns and reports blaming social media for this occurrence. So the question now is, was this a preventable incident?
He was friendly and he was nice and he was so funny. He was so funny. He would always have me laughing. We used to play this game called Kick the Can, and he was the fastest runner, so we always wanted to be on his team.
Richard's friend Patricia found him kind and caring.
If we wanted to take a shortcut to school, we had to cut through this really tough neighborhood. And he always used to wait for me, sitting on a little pony wall, and then he would walk me to school. It was always safer, to be in twos, I guess. He used to sit in back of me in 5th grade, and I remember that he would poke me in the back. And every time he would poke me, I would jump up. And so that time that he kept poking me, I turned around very upset, and I said, hey, stop. And I remember him like slumping over and then just hitting the floor on the side.
He would have seizures. He would be shaking. We knew he was sick.
The third murder, which is the second incident, okay? I'm in the middle of trying to get my record sealed, right? Thursday night, I killed her. I took off Friday. I didn't go to work. I called in sick, took CTO. All right? Dismembered her body, got rid of her body, but kept her head in her hands because they're identifiable. They're highly identifiable. I kept those at the apartment. Okay? That Friday night, Thursday night, I took her. Friday morning, she was dismembered. Friday night, she was disposed of. Right? Saturday morning, I left. Right? And I wasn't satisfied that I took the head along in the hands, but I couldn't put them someplace that could be sure they would be dug up by an animal or just be somewhere. It's scary going out there trying to bury somebody or dispose of body parts in a community or out even in the boonies where you don't know where you're at and who can come up at any moment. I had some real close calls there. There are people that come out of nowhere. And if a body's found and they remember this beige-looking car sitting there the night, that's evidence. So it was very, very hard to get rid of this stuff.
For the record, you are guilty of killing many women and girls.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
Ted, how did it happen? Take me back. What are the antecedents of the behavior that we've seen? So much grief, so much sorrow, so much pain for so many people. Where did it start? How did this moment come about?
I grew up in a wonderful home with two dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers and sisters. But as a young boy, and I mean a boy of 12 or 13 certainly, that I encountered outside the home again, the local grocery store, the local drugstore, the softcore pornography, what people call softcore. As young boys do, we explored the back roads and sideways and byways of our neighborhood, and oftentimes people would dump the garbage and whatever they were cleaning out of their house, and from time to time we'd come across pornographic books of a harder nature than more graphic, you might say, more explicit nature than we would encounter, let's say, in your local grocery store.
2022, the town of Slaughter, Louisiana, was shaken by the death of 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher. Lacey suffered from a medical condition known as locked-in syndrome, making her almost completely paralyzed. Due to her medical condition, Lacey spent all of her life at home, as she began to develop some degree of Asperger's syndrome. Lacey's parents were her caretakers, although they neglected that responsibility and treated Lacey inhumanely, leaving her to relieve herself on the same couch that she spent most of her life. Lacey's neighbors stated that the last time they saw her in public was 15 years before this incident. At the time of her death, Lacey weighed 96 pounds and had contracted COVID-19. On January 3rd, 2022, Lacey was found dead in a couch covered in feces and urine. It was believed that she was in that same spot for years without being catered to. Her body was covered in ulcers, her hair matted and filled with maggots. Her parents, Sheila and Clay Fletcher, were charged with second-degree murder and detained for the severe chronic neglect. Despite all of this, they pleaded not guilty and were released on bail. Sheila and Clay Fletcher will begin trial on June 19th, 2023.
This influencer's body parts were found in pots of human soup just last month. On the 15th of February, 28-year-old model Abby Choi posted a beautiful photo on her Instagram. She had no idea of her horrific fate less than 2 weeks later. On February the 25th, 2023, police made a horrifying discovery. A splatter-proof makeshift butcher's workshop was found in a rented 3-story home. Inside of the home, they found 2 human legs in a fridge and Abby's decapitated head in a soup pot. Alongside the head, carrots and radishes were also in the process of being cooked. Minced human meat was also found at the scene. In the rented flat, police found a homemade butcher's shop equipped with meat grinders, chainsaws and meat cleavers. Abby's handbag was also found at the scene, including her ID, which helped to identify her. Heartbreakingly, Abby was a mother of 4 young children. Police in Hong Kong have charged Abby's ex-husband, Alex Kwong, his father and brother with the murder. It's alleged that the 3 men rented an apartment where they'd meticulously planned the murder. It's also alleged that the motive for the killing was a family dispute over money. Abby's children are now being looked after by her mother.
Yeah. And you asked me to come here from California because you had something you wanted to say. It is not just an interview with a man who's scheduled to die tomorrow morning. I'm here and you're here because of this message that you're talking about right here. You really feel that hardcore pornography and the doorway to it, softcore pornography, is doing untold damage to other people and causing other women to be abused and killed the way you did others.
Listen, I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've lived in prison for a long time now, and I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography.
Been like without that influence. You can only speculate.
Yeah.
911, where's your emergency? I just killed someone. 100, Route 46. What do you mean you just killed someone? Exactly what I said. I'm armed and dangerous. Where are you? You know what? I'm armed, I'm dangerous, send the cops out. I'm in a parking lot, I can see from every angle. I will shoot at anyone who approaches the car. How many people did you hurt? You know, I'm not in a condition to talk. Okay, can you at least tell me what city you're in so I can send the police out there? Mountain Lake. You're in Mountain Lakes? Yeah. How many people did you kill? Just one person? Just one person. Just one person? I'm reloading right now. I'm going to shoot at anybody that approaches the car. Okay, that's not a problem, sir. I'd advise you not to reload and do that, but... What's your name? You just hung up on me.
10-year-old serial killer. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Mary Bell, and she could easily be one of the most sadistic murderers in history, even though she was only 10 years old. Mary allegedly grew up being abused, and her mother would even sell her to other men at the age of 5. All of this abuse fueled this anger inside of her, and she had to find some sort of way to release it. On May 11th, 1968, Mary Bell was playing with a little 3-year-old toddler, and he mysteriously fell off of an air raid shelter. This was the start of her violent outrage. Just 2 weeks later, on March 25th, the boy Martin Brown's body was found dead inside of an abandoned building. It was later discovered that Mary lured this little boy into this abandoned building and strangled him with her bare hands. 2 years later, Mary then strangled a 3-year-old boy and carved the letter M into his stomach with a razor blade. And then she used scissors to cut and mutilate the body. Mary eventually confessed to this by writing notes because she was bragging about it, and the police arrested her. Here's the crazy thing. She was arrested and released just a couple years later, and today she could possibly still be alive. One of the terms for her confession was that after she was released, her name would be changed and everything. The latest information we have of her is pretty much she had a daughter when she got released, and nobody knows where she's at now. So what do you think? Do you think she should be forgiven because she was a child, or do you think that fire is still inside of her waiting to strike again? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and follow for more videos.
One of the strangest missing persons cases I've ever seen revolves around someone that might not even exist. Let me explain. In 1989, a local Chicago television station called WMAQ was wrapping up their regularly scheduled television for the night, when all of a sudden the audio was cut and the image on screen was changed to a strange missing persons panel. The image of the individual shown was too low quality to make out any details, and no information other than the woman's name, Joanna Lopez, were given. The broadcast wouldn't be too out of the ordinary if it wasn't for the fact that she was never mentioned anywhere again. And when people tried to find her, they found no records of a woman named Joanna Lopez in Chicago, even with police filings. So, who was this woman in the broadcast? And how did a missing persons panel for her end up on the news? Well, when the news agency was asked about the panel, they claimed it was sent by an anonymous person. which leaves us with the most likely answer being that it was a prank or an alternate reality game. And as for who was actually in the photo, the lead seems to be a woman by the name of Rachel Lopez. A photo of her was found in a West Chicago yearbook from 1990, and although she has a different first name than Joanna, the fact that they look so similar and share a last name leads many to believe that she could be the one in the photo. Sadly though, it seems like we may never know for sure, as no one has been able to contact the woman in the yearbook.
In 2007, Knoxville, Tennessee was rocked by the brutal murder of 21-year-old Shannon Christian and 23-year-old Christopher Newsom. Shannon and Christopher were headed to a party on the night of January 6th. When they didn't show up to the party, the couple's friends started texting and calling them, but received no response. Around 11 p.m. that evening, a couple of their friends went to Shannon's apartment to see if they were there. Shannon and Christopher were not at the apartment, and they were unable to locate Shannon's SUV. It turns out that the couple were victims of a carjacking and kidnapping. The couple was taken to a rental home where they were essayed, tortured, and murdered. A witness arrived at work around 12:30 a.m. on January 7th. He noticed that the lights of the rental home were on and the home seemed quite busy for that time of night. The witness later observed a white 4Runner slowly drive by him with 4 men in the car. Another witness stated that they heard gunshots around 1:45 a.m. near the railroad tracks. That afternoon, around 12 p.m., Christopher's body was found near the tracks, wrapped in a comforter. Shannon was failing to respond to calls and text messages all day long. Using the last ping from her cell phone, authorities found her white 4Runner. On January 9th, authorities went to the rental home and found her body in a trash can in the kitchen. There were 5 people who helped commit this sickening crime, 4 of which were convicted to life in prison without parole, and 1 was convicted to the death penalty.
911, what's the location of the emergency? Please help me! Yes, what address do you need help? I'm not on an address, I'm on a road, on Myers Road! He's trying to kill me! Which road are you on? Myers Road in Oregon City! Okay, do you have an address? Listen. Kathy Lee, come on, get a cop here now! Okay, who's trying to kill you? My husband! He's trying to pick up truck! Okay, what? He's trying to kill me! Come on! He's trying to die! And what kind of gun does he have? Ma'am, take a deep breath so I can understand you. Ma'am, I've already got help coming. I need you to tell me wire and what? On Glenn. I'm on Glenn. Wire. Just a minute. I'm walking. He shot me. Okay, you're on wire at Glenview Court? He shot me. Okay, where did he shoot you? In the chest. In the chest? He's over there.
Baby Burger, uno de los casos más traumáticos, atroces y perturbadores de la Deep Web. Todo comienza con una cámara de seguridad apuntando hacia una calle, en donde se observa a una mujer que va caminando con su bebé. Sabemos que es una bebé, porque la madre dio su declaración a la policía de lo que pasó aquella vez. Después, se observa que un automóvil llega y 2 sujetos salen rápidamente. Uno de ellos toma a la mujer y la empuja, mientras que el otro sujeto toma a la bebé y la mete dentro del automóvil para así escapar. La toma del video continúa en un bosque. Los sujetos aparecen con un pasamontañas, para no ser identificados. Proceden a sacar a la bebé del automóvil, para llevarla a lo más profundo del bosque, hasta llegar a un lugar donde hay una mesa muy grande. El otro sujeto procede a traer un aparato, el cual en este momento del video está cubierto por una tela amarilla. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé y la coloca en la mesa, para empezar a abusar de ella, en un terrible acto donde escuchamos los gritos que son desgarradores. El volumen del video sube exageradamente, provocando la risa de uno de los sujetos. Después, procede a darle algunas bofetadas, a lo que comienza a sangrar de la boca. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé de los pies, el otro, toma el artefacto quitándole la tela amarilla. Vemos que es una máquina para triturar troncos de árboles. Encienden la máquina y el sujeto posa frente a la cámara, dejando caer a la bebé. La cámara hace un enfoque a la caída de la bebé en dicha máquina, a lo que ésta se llena de sangre, igual que las camisas de los dos sujetos. Finalmente, la cámara enfoca a la carne molida que sale de la máquina, para que los dos sujetos comiencen a comerla.
If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive, and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked round her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her two friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Haslett Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs and they haven't yet released what they know.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
Mysterious case absolutely does not sit right with me. Someone knows something and has not come forward. On the 12th of July 2015, 18-year-old Tiffany and her parents attended a graduation party in New Jersey. At around 9 p.m, one of Tiffany's friends spoke to her parents and claimed that they were really annoyed because Tiffany had used their debit card without permission. Tiffany initially denied this to her friend, but then did admit this to her mum Diane a little bit later. At this point, they were all outside Tiffany's house and Diane went inside to find her husband. When she returned outside of the house, Tiffany had vanished. Now, they were able to see Tiffany on the deer cameras that they had outside the house. She appears to be walking down the driveway in her normal clothing and white headband. When they tried to find Tiffany, they actually made a terrifying discovery. Her phone was lying on the floor at the bottom of the driveway. Immediately, they knew something was wrong as Tiffany never had her phone out of her sight. At 11:30 p.m, her family called the police. Little did they know, 27 minutes earlier, Tiffany had been hit by a train. Frustratingly, pretty much straight away, police presumed this death to be a self-unaliving. However, that just didn't seem to fit with the evidence presented. All of Tiffany's family and friends said how much of an upbeat person she was and that she was really happy at the time. She was making plans for the future, and the autopsy also showed that she had a clean toxicology report. Now, in the deer cam footage, she was fully clothed, but when she was found, she was just in her underwear with no shoes on. Upsettingly, 2 weeks after her death, Tiffany's mum actually found her missing trainers and headband more than a mile away from the tracks. Could someone have murdered Tiffany and then dumped her body on the train tracks to make it look like she did this herself? Tiffany's parents certainly think so. They definitely suspect some foul play was involved.
This is Japan's youngest murdered at only 11 years old. Nevada murdered her best friend.
I honestly think this is one of the most interesting and messed up cases ever. And if you haven't heard about this case, click in that video and she'll give you the gist of what happened. When I first heard about this case, I saw every video, read every article about it. Anything I could find, I saw it or read it. And after so much research about it, I found some things that not a lot of people know about this case. For example, the first thing is this is not Nevada. This is somebody wearing a costume of Nevada. Yes, a costume, like in Halloween, dressing up as an 11-year-old murderer. This is an actual picture of her, one of few pictures that we have of actual Nevada. There's a lot of more pictures of people dressing up as her, but I don't want to show them because some are really gruesome and I just don't think there's anything cute or funny about dressing up as a murderer. So yeah, some even try to make it sexy. It's just I don't know, I just think it's weird. Another thing is that, I mean, this is not the real girl, but for the sake of the video, the actual Nevada, that's not her real name. Nevada is not her name. It's just what people started calling her because she had that sweater on when she did the murder. Nevada Tan. Due to Nevada being still young at the time of the murder, her name was not sent to public to keep her safe in her identity. They never know her name because now she's out of jail and she has changed her name, probably changed states. She could be in the US, we don't know. But yeah, we're probably never gonna know her name.
This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Thelma Boinville was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Hayley Dangerand were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Thelma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Thelma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Thelma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Hayley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Thelma's husband, Kevin, wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Hayley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Hayley is currently awaiting trial.
Now that it's summertime, here are 3 of the scariest theme park accidents I've ever heard of. These stories are ordered to get more intense as it goes on, so if the first story is too much for you, then you probably don't want to stick around for the third. On June 21st, 2007, 13-year-old Caitlin Lassiter went to Six Flags of Kentucky. While she was here, she decided to go on the Superman drop ride. This is the kind of ride that lifts you up really high into the air and then it drops you down really fast. However, when their car got to the top, a cable snapped and became undone. This cable became wrapped around Caitlin's throat and feet. She was able to untangle the cord from around her neck, but she wasn't able to get to her feet before the ride dropped, and both of her feet were pulled off. They were able to attach one, but she did end up becoming an amputee. On June 2nd, 2015, the Smiler roller coaster in the UK was having several problems, and one of the test cars got stuck in the middle of the track. However, the employees hadn't communicated with each other that they had added a 5th car, so everyone thought there were 4. So when they saw all 4 cars at the station ready to go, they assumed that the test was done. They then loaded a car full of passengers and sent it down the track, not realizing that a car was already sitting stationary in the middle. The car with passengers inside rear-ended the empty car, resulting in serious injuries. The 2 girls that were sitting in the front of the car had to have their legs amputated, and And the horror of this was all made worse because it took emergency services 4 to 5 hours to reach them as everybody was sitting mangled on this roller coaster. The Verrückt water slide was the world's tallest water slide in August 2016, where our third accident happened. This water slide had an extremely steep drop and then a hill, and 3 people would sit in each boat. The owner of the water park had actually self-insured this slide because it was too dangerous for any insurance company to take on. In August 2016, Caleb Schwab went to the water park with his family, and the very first ride he wanted to go on was Verrückt. Caleb sat in the front and was too lightweight to weigh it down, so the ride went airborne. Then everyone watched in horror as the front of the slide impacted the metal safety railing that arched over the top of the slide. He flew out of the raft but hit the netting so hard that he was, It was quick for Caleb, but not for the crowd, as they then had to watch the boat finish the ride as the water began to run red. A guest at the park physically restrained Caleb's mom so she couldn't walk over and see what happened. So the last image she has of her son is excited to go on the ride and stepping into the line.